I love to feature new watches here on my channel, and today I have an amazing vintage inspired dive watch from a brand called Fleux. And what I really like about this watch is that they use a few different elements from some of my favorite vintage watches and combine it into one package that really is very cohesive. This is probably one of the best vintage inspired dive watches that I've ever featured on my channel that isn't actually vintage. And I think if you're wearing one of these watches, a lot of people would actually mistaken it for a true vintage watch. So let's flip the camera and take a look at a brand that I've never featured here on my channel before, the vintage inspired FLX001 and 002. I'm always excited to showcase new brands here on my channel. Today we have Fleux. Now I believe that's how you pronounce it. If I am pronouncing it wrong, I apologize. Please correct me down in the comment section below. However, I have two watches to show you. There is two different versions. There's the FLX001. I believe that is the version that does not have a California dial. Then there is the FLX002 that has a California dial. So it comes in pretty nice packaging. This is what it's going to actually come in. It's a leather box. And inside you have obviously a watch, but it also is sort of molded to the watch itself. I guess you could use this as a travel pouch, but it's more of just a box, but it's a really nice box. So something a little bit different, and I think that you could probably travel with it and it would keep your watch very, very safe. But this is the California dial version. And this is hands down my favorite. That's the reason why I started with this one. It is a California dial. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's actually a dial that was used by salesmen. So when they were going around showing watches, they would be able to show them, you know, the different fonts that they were using for different dials, and it would be all on one dial. And that became actually pretty popular. And so that's what you see here. This is a California dial. You have orange for that minutes hand, but it's a very pale orange, and then you have, I think it's black for the hour hand, and then you have an arrow for the seconds hand, and all of the indices that are non-primary are very faintly applied, so they're very thin, and it looks very, very vintage. You're gonna have to really get used to that because it's going to be a little bit difficult to see. However, the effect is perfect. It really is. I have to say, this is one of the best executed vintage style watches that I have encountered. And they've really done a good job. This sort of reminds me of a vintage 50 Fathoms in a case that reminds me of a 62 Moss. However, there were tons of watches in the 60s and 70s that used a very similar case design to this. So it's sort of one of those watches meets a 50 Fathoms. You have a thin bezel on here though, and the bezel itself, I believe they said is aluminum. However, I think it might be ceramic. I'm not entirely sure. From what I can see, it looks very, very glossy. I'm not entirely sure. And then you have a pip. So the pip is just right there. That is lumed. All of this is old radium, by the way. And you do get a bi-directional bezel. So you can see, so it's friction fitted and it's bi-directional. You have a screwed in crown, a screwed in case back. You get 200 meters of water resistance. So this is an actual dive watch that is very, very vintage inspired. And then you have a, I guess you would call it a sailcloth strap. It feels and looks like sailcloth. However, it's made with recycled ocean plastic. So it's like a nylon strap. It's leather backed. As you can see, you have quick release. Solid case back on here. This gets an NH38, and that is because when you unscrew the crown, this is a dateless watch. When you unscrew the crown, pop it into the first position, there is no ghost date position. So they actually did the right thing and went the extra mile and got the NH38 rather than an NH35 or an NH36, and you don't have a ghost date position where the date would normally be. Now it just says like 660 feet right there, and there's their logo. That's the logo right there. There's just a rectangle with a line through it. You also get that logo on the crown. It's very lightly etched into the crown, but you can see from the case profile, you can see those long lugs, but very 70s looking case. I have a Bulova that has a very similar case to this that was from the 1970s. I have a few watches that look kind of similar to this case. This was not a case that was used by any one brand, I would say. So very quickly, let's do measurements. This is around a 39 millimeter watch. It's going to wear like a 39 millimeter watch, so at that bezel it's 39 millimeters. The lugs, like I said, are pretty straight and flat on the ends. So the lug to lug is a pretty good 46.9. The crown, 5.9 millimeters, and the thickness with that domed Hesalite crystal. So you're getting a Hesalite crystal. So this is an acrylic, basically an acrylic crystal, so 13.8 millimeters. It is double domed, and it also adds a little bit of warmth to the dial, which you get from a, plastic crystal or acrylic crystal. So that's what you're getting here, and both of them have that. I actually have another watch on my wrist. It is the non-California dial version. I'll show you that in just a second. And then here is the buckle. It just has the brand name right there. It's a solid buckle, really nice. And I'll talk about price in just a second as well. But here it is on my 7.5 inch wrist. This is the non-California dial. This gets markings on the bezel, so that's obviously different from the sterile bezel that you're getting here. However, I still prefer this one because it's just cool. I really love this. This is my favorite right here. I really love the dial. I love the bezel. I don't think this is bad at all. It's the exact same dimensions, exactly the same look almost. You have very, very faint, again, markings on this bezel. It almost looks vintage. I think someone seeing this on your wrist would not realize this was a modern watch until picking it up and feeling it, and you notice obviously it's very solid and new feeling. However, maybe even then someone would not realize this is not a vintage watch. That's how well they have executed this watch, I have to tell you. They went the extra mile to get the details right. All the indices here are painted on. You can see there's a little bit of detail that is weird on here as well. The top portion of the dial has larger indices than the bottom portion, and that is obviously for orientation in the dark. I don't know if you're getting a lumed bezel. We'll do a lume shot at the end. Again, you're getting old radium. You're getting the same handset. You're getting a lumed second hand. So obviously legible in the dark, and you can obviously see that it's working in the dark, which I think is very important. Price on this is $449, and I have to say, even though it has a NH38 inside, which is sort of a standard movement these days, you do have a solid case back. It really doesn't matter. It's all about the vintage vibes that you are getting from this watch, and they did it well. I think this went to Kickstarter and funded, and I can completely see why. The quality is here. They're using recycled materials for the strap. The strap is really nice. It's not one of those really hard tied or hashtag tied straps, which I really don't like. It's actually pretty soft, and I would imagine break in really nicely over time. So very quickly, I'm going to throw these under a UV light, and then we will do a lume shot. Well, there you go. Lume is actually excellent on here. I'm pretty impressed. I wish the bezel was fully lumed on this model, but really, I can't complain. I think that they liberally applied the lume, especially on the one with the solid big indices, because they're obviously bigger. You're getting more lume, so it's a little bit brighter, whereas the California dial, not as bright because you're not getting as much lume physically. So that makes sense. So lume, very good on here, and it actually holds on pretty well. I give this a thumbs up on lume. Okay, so my 3 questions. Are they ugly? Absolutely not. These are very good looking watches, especially in my opinion, the California dial with the sterile bezel. I think that's a really good looking watch. I think both of them are very good looking. Really great vintage vibes, done really well in my opinion. Question number 2, is it cool? I think these are really cool. Again, especially the California dial. I think that if someone saw this on your wrist, they would not be able to tell that this was a modern watch. That's how well they have done this. And I think you would need to take it off and they would have to inspect it. And even then, there's a chance they may not be able to tell that this is a vintage watch, which is kind of cool, I guess. It's kind of weird. And then they put the Hesselite on here, so you're like in the know. It's kind of cool. You can buff it out when you get scratches on it. I don't know. I think it is definitely a cool watch. Last question, is it worth it? So is it worth the price? $449 is expensive for a watch with an NH product inside. However, it is an NH38, so they went the extra mile, so you don't have a date that is a ghost date position, so that is really good. And again, the attention to detail is very high on these watches at impressive levels. Everything, all the little details have been paid attention to. You get lots of lume. The bezels are awesome. Just a really good looking watch. By the way, this also gets a friction fitted bi-directional bezel, so feels very nice. And it's not loose, it's not too tight. It's perfect for a friction fitted bezel. So all in all, I think these are definitely worth the price. You're getting 200 meters of water resistance, really nice packaging. But really what matters here is the style of the watch and the attention to detail and quality. So I think definitely worth that $449. Anyway, guys, tell me what you think down in the comments below. I want to hear from you guys. What do you think of these watches? What do you think of the vintage vibes? Which one would you choose? Would you choose the California dial like myself with the sterile bezel? Or would you choose this one with the weird indices, the maxi indices versus the sort of smaller indices at the bottom of the dial? Pretty cool that they did that, sort of taking a chance, making it very interesting, in my opinion. Also, the straps are very nice as well, considering that they are recycled ocean plastic, so that's nice as well. Tell me what you think down in the comments. Please also don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon. It is super helpful for the channel, and I very much appreciate it. Anyway, guys, thank you for logging on. I will catch you in the next video.